From November 22, 2021 Observer Newsletter, AEW Full Gear Review. Match of the Week, Adam Page vs. Kenny Omega, November 13, Minneapolis. Performer of the Week, Kenny Omega. Stephen Woltz, 30, better known as Hangman Adam Page, became the world champion of the second largest wrestling company in the world in the latest stage of a storyline that started at the promotion's first press conference nearly 3 years ago in Jacksonville. From the start of the promotion, the plan was to make Page, who Tony Khan at the time referred to as their potential Shawn Michaels-like character, the eventual centerpiece. It took years, and had many twists and turns, including a heel turn which wound up not taking and him becoming a babyface, and instead Kenny Omega became the heel. Page beat Omega in a classic match to headline Full Gear, a pay-per-view that was named after a BTE storyline where the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes years ago had done a tongue-in-cheek long series of skits making fun of Page's physique, and that by the pay-per-view. They wanted him to look good in his trunks, or his full wrestling gear. The title change was originally set for All Out, but that was changed and Christian Cage was put in the spot when Page asked for time off because his wife was having a baby at that time. While some saw it as the end of the multi-year story, it was actually just another step. The ultimate story is when the crew that started the promotion together, the Young Bucks, Page and Omega reunite, likely as babyfaces. Page pinned Omega in 25-10 after a buckshot lariat. The key note to the story is that the night before, Page had apologized to the Young Bucks for costing them a tag team title shot at the behest of FTR in a long-ago storyline, but noted that they had cost him his title shot, the one originally planned for All Out, so that they were even, and warned them not to touch him in the match or he would hunt them down forever. At the finish, after Omega had kicked out of Page giving him the one-winged angel, the Young Bucks came out. Nick Jackson was on one side of the ring, but did not interfere as Page delivered a buckshot lariat to the back of the head. Page then went to the other side, where Matt Jackson was. Matt teased interfering, but stopped and then nodded, basically telling Page they were not going to interfere, and he hit the buckshot lariat for the pin. It was a callback to Page's first and only title challenge, to Chris Jericho at the first Full Gear, where he asked the Young Bucks to be in his corner, like they were for Omega's biggest matches in Japan. But they were busy and didn't do it. Excalibur pushed at the finish that the Bucks were not in Page's corner when he asked, but they were in his corner when he finally won the title. Omega will be taking several months off. In what is likely his television farewell on the November 17th Dynamite in Norfolk, he mentioned that he had not watched back the match, a key because it was the explanation needed that he didn't see and wasn't aware of the Young Bucks not helping him. With the Bucks and Adam Cole there at the start of the show, he told them to hold down the fort while he was gone for a while. Cole said they would, but Omega told Cole that he was talking to the Bucks, a tease for an eventual Cole vs. Omega program a long time from now. Omega, 38, has worked all year, having some of the year's best matches including bouts with Rey Fenix, Bryan Danielson and the brutal death match with Jon Moxley while battling numerous injuries. He suffered a hip injury against Laredo Kid, has had a lack of rotation and mobility in his neck for years, as has battled issues with vertigo. Omega did an interview with his chiropractor that he posted, noting that he's had a lot of significant neck issues since 2018. He said that his neck doesn't have full range of motion, but he's also been suffering from vertigo and that at times he's in the ring and feels like everything is spinning. He noted one of the new skills he's had to learn was to be able to wrestle when it feels like things are spinning. He worked most of this year with a torn labrum in his shoulder. He's also worked for months on an abdominal hernia, as well as knee issues. At times he's been in great pain and at other times it's been manageable pain. He's done constant rehab and medical treatments weekly to stay in the game as champion. On the big stage, he had to be one of the best in the world, given much of the year he held the world titles of AEW, Impact and AAA, meaning he was called to headline both the major AEW and Impact shows at the same time. At times he privately wondered if he'd done so much damage over the years that his time left in the sport was limited, and publicly on one of our shows was more open and in-depth about his in-ring future. AAA was told on November 17 that Omega was getting surgery and wouldn't be able to face El Hijo del Vikingo on December 4 in Monterrey in the main event of Triple Mania Regia, where he was to defend the AAA Mega Heavyweight title. AAA were told to have an idea for a backup plan, but at press time it wasn't finalized, but should be known shortly if it pans out. Omega will be getting surgery for the shoulder, knee and abdominal issues, and likely for a septum issue, using different specialists. The surgeries will not be that major and the expectation would be for him to return in or around late February, but Tony Khan has told him to take the time off that he needs. Dax Harwood came into his match with a bruised tailbone and said he had a rainbow-colored ass. He apparently got it from taking a backdrop on the floor in the singles match with Pac, who flipped him out of a pile driver. He was also rocked by Rey Fenix about 10 minutes into his tag match. After the show, Tony Khan said that the four people, Jericho, Moxley, Omega and Page, were always scheduled to be the first four people to hold the AEW title from day one. He noted there were a lot of plans that changed along the way due to the pandemic and other reasons. Full Gear, as far as just the matches went, would have to be considered among the greatest wrestling shows in history. We had 8 matches, 4 stars or better. From our feedback, a ton of people called it the best pay-per-view show of all time, or in AEW history. But the reality is AEW has had numerous great pay-per-view shows. Because of the surprises and significance with the debuts of Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Minoru Suzuki and Ruby Soho in CM Punk's first match in more than 7 years, All Out felt like and was a bigger show. Overall, I'd go with All Out as the better show, but this show, as far as one great match after another, beat it in the ring and has to rank with some of the best of the Wrestle Kingdom events bell to bell. The current projections are that the pay-per-view will do about 150,000 buys, the second largest in company history, trailing the 205,000 of All Out. Realistically, there was no way it was beating All Out because the company was so hot coming off the Punk return and the Danielson surprise was largely out. This show had one surprise, Jay Lethal, but people didn't know that in advance, and Lethal was hardly the name that Punk or Danielson are. Lethal agreed to terms a few weeks ago for a full-time contract after Ring of Honor agreed to let anyone have a release early if they got an outside offer. Lethal is done with Ring of Honor and won't be working the December 11th Final Battle show in Baltimore. The 150,000 projection is based on streaming buys being slightly ahead of the February Revolution show, which finished at 145,000 for the Omega vs. Moxley explosive barbed wire match. It is close enough that it could end up in third place. There were no cable estimates at press time, but one source for pay-per-view did tell us that the cable buys were very strong, better than anything but All Out, meaning it's possible it could be larger. Even in third place, that would be a huge success because the first 2 Full Gear shows did about 85,000 and 95,000 respectively, so this would be an increase of about 57.9% from last year. It continues AEW's streak from day one where every pay-per-view has beaten the number of the same named show the previous year. The Omega title run in 2021 led to the company's 4 biggest shows in its history, with shows of 145,000, 135,000, 205,000, and an estimated 150,000 buys, an annual increase of 44.3%. His match with Rich Swann with the AEW and Impact titles at stake also led to Impact doing its best pay-per-view number since the Hulk Hogan vs. Sting match when they were still on Spike. The live show at the Target Center in Minneapolis did more than 10,500 fans, shy of what would be a sellout of just over 13,000 with a pro wrestling stage setup. The paid was just over 10,000 with a $640,000 gate. The $640,000 gate would have been third largest in company history, behind the $700,000 for All Out 2021 in Chicago, which was a sellout and had the potential to do tons more, and the record $960,000 for the September 22 Dynamite show at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. The Punk debut at the United Center was priced lower due to it not being a pay-per-view, and sold out at $635,000, so obviously had the potential to do more as well. But I'd call it a success as Minneapolis was not a good pay-per-view market at all. The movie theater business grossed $150,000. It was more than All Out, but far less impressive. All Out did $120,000 in 140 theaters or $857 per screen or an average of $34 per theater. This was in 314 theaters or $478 per screen or an average of $19 per theater. Still, it was ahead of WWE's SummerSlam that did about $125,000 in 400 theaters, or $313 per screen, and an average of $13 per theater. Between that and Google searches declining from 500,000 for All Out to 50,000 here, it shows that as far as casual interest because of Punk and Danielson, it was down, but the pay-per-view numbers holding up so well indicates that Omega vs. Page was a huge match, not mainstream, but to the AEW audience. Between the lower TV ratings and far less Google searches, one would have thought the pay-per-view would not do nearly as well as it did. Perhaps AEW delivering strong on almost every pay-per-view show, and particularly the last one, was a factor. In the past, having a great show, even though logic would say otherwise, does not have a correlation to the business of the next show. In wrestling, historically shows in the past drew on pay-per-view based on the lure of the main event, not consistent quality of shows. In more modern times, shows drew largely on the name of the show itself as opposed to the matches on the show, with the exception of John Cena vs. The Rock or the Donald Trump WrestleMania, which did well above what WrestleMania would have been expected to do. The next pay-per-view, Revolution, would be expected to be in February, but no date was listed, nor was a city listed. There was talk of the Midwest or Southeast, with Las Vegas likely for double or nothing on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. The plan seems to be to run shows on Sundays to avoid the usual combat sports competition on Saturdays and other sports events, except during football season where they would go on Saturday to avoid the NFL. Overall, between pay-per-view, theaters, livegate and merchandise, the show would be expected to gross $7.32 million, making it the second largest non-WWE show since 1999. The AEW cut would be approximately $3.81 million. Bryan Danielson beat Miro to win the title contenders tournament, and then on Dynamite, went heel for his title shot with Paige. No date has been announced for the show. One would think the first Battle of the Belts on January 8th would be a possible date, and to build it up it looks like they are doing a storyline where Danielson will go through all the members of the Dark Order and beat them to set up the match, the same basic storyline that UFC fell into with the ultra-successful Ronda Rousey vs. Beta Korea fight where Korea beat the other horsewomen, Shayna Baszler and Jessamyn Duke, to set up what ended up being at the time the most successful, by far, women's combat fight in history. Rousey's last two fights beat that total. The show featured a variety of different styles of great matches, one after the other. The Lucha Brothers retained their AEW tag team titles, beating AAA champs FTR, and Britt Baker retained her women's title, beating Tay Conti. MJF beat Darby Allin to open the show up with one of the better pay-per-view openers in history. They seem to be teasing MJF as a contender for the title against the Paige vs. Danielson winner, but also have teased the idea of an MJF vs. CM Punk match first. Cody Rhodes played more into a heel leaning as he and Pac had problems in their tag match against Andrade and Malachi Black, who also teased problems at the end. Rhodes was booed during the match, but Rhodes and Pac didn't split up and ended up winning when Pac pinned Andrade after the Black Arrow. The Inner Circle's Minneapolis Street Fight win over Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page and Andrei Arlovsky and Junior Dos Santos and Dan Lambert ended when Chris Jericho pinned Lambert after a frog splash. This was a tribute to Eddie Guerrero, who had died 16 years to the day of the show, only minutes away from the Target Center. The match also featured a cameo appearance from one of the last surviving true legends of the AWA era, when 81-year-old James Baron von Raschke, the first American heavyweight ever to place in the World Greco-Roman Championships, third place in 1963, was planted in the front row to put the claw on Ethan Page. In an even wilder match, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus and Christian Cage beat the Young Bucks and Cole in a Falls Count Anywhere no DQ match when Jungle Boy grabbed a chair from Christian so he could do a concerto to Matt and score the biggest win of his career, and he himself looked at the sky, presumably in tribute to his own father. Equally wild was Punk's win over Eddie Kingston, in a hot match. Nobody got a bigger reaction than Punk when he came out. But Kingston was never booed, and there were points in the match that Punk was, such as when he did ground and pound on Kingston. There were a lot of dueling chants. The chants for Punk were louder, but the ones for Kingston were very loud as well. Punk juiced and the crowd was super hot. They were flipping each other off. Punk, a huge fan of Guerrero's, did the Three Amigos. Punk won after a second GTS. When Punk went to shake Kingston's hand after, Kingston just walked off. 1. Hikaru Shida and Thunder Rosa beat Jamie Hayter and Nyla Rose in 12:05. This was the buy-in match. The match itself was good, but the finish was weak. Shida was outside the ring arguing with Serena Deeb. Vicky Guerrero hit Shida with a cane shot. Hayter did a superplex on Shida and Rose did a frog splash on Shida. Rose did the Eddie Guerrero dance before the frog splash. Rosa made the save. The finish saw Rose go for the Beast Bomb on Shida, who reversed it into a Urukan Rana and into a jackknife pin. But the execution of the finish looked bad. 2 stars half. 2. MJF pinned Darby Allin in 22:01. The crowd was super hot for this. MJF had vowed to win the match with a headlock takeover. This was the same angle with the basic same finish that these two had done a few years back in PWG. The match was tremendous. Allin did an awesome top A. MJF worked on Allin's back. MJF teased a tombstone off the middle rope, but Allin reversed into a stunner off the middle rope. He went for the coffin drop, but MJF rolled away. Allin went for a Hurricane Rana, but MJF turned it into a power bomb into a knee. Allin speared the knee to set up a figure 4. MJF did a tombstone pile driver on the apron. Allin did all kinds of quick cradles and a code ref off a power bomb. At that point the crowd stood up and gave both a standing ovation. Allin did a coffin drop off the top rope, hitting MJF laying on the floor. Shawn Spears and Wardlow came out. Sting hit both with his bat. Spears went for a chair shot, but Sting got the chair and hit Spears over and over with it. MJF got Allen's skateboard and dared Allen to hit him with it for the DQ. Allen refused to do so, and as the ref got the skateboard out of the ring, MJF pulled out the diamond ring and hit Allen with it. He then used a side headlock and pinned him. 4 stars half. 3. Penta El Cerro Miedo and Rey Fenix retained the AEW tag titles over FTR in 1838. Fenix did an incredible rope walk spot. Fenix did a plunge, but Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood caught him and gave him an overhead throw on the floor into Penta. The crowd was going nuts after a super kick spot. There was double submission spot. They tied Penta's mask up in the ropes, but referee Rick Knox untied him. Fenix did a stunner on both at the same time. Fenix did a rope walk kick on Harwood. Cash Wheeler hit Fenix with a belt shot and Harwood used a brainbuster on him, but Fenix kicked out. Tully Blanchard grabbed Penta's leg. Dax Harwood went for the Three Amigos, but Penta blocked the third. Penta frog splashed Harwood, leading to Eddie Chance. In an incredible spot, Penta had Harwood in a Penta driver position and Fenix came off the top rope with the double foot stomp stuff, and then springboarded off him into a crossbody on Wheeler and both kicked out. The crowd went nuts, and for the crowd that should have been the finish, as that was its peak. Harwood got knocked silly legit by Fenix, so they had to recalibrate the last few minutes. But they had a storyline finish where Cash put on a mask and they did a switch, so he was the illegal man. Penta and Fenix used the double foot stomp stuff Penta driver on Wheeler for the pin, but Wheeler was the illegal man. 4 stars and a quarter stars. 4. Bryan Danielson beat Miro in 20 minutes to win the Top Contenders tournament. Danielson had a black eye, apparently from the Rocky Romero match. Another great match. Miro did an overhead throw on the floor. They threw each other into the post. Danielson did a missile dropkick, all kinds of kicks and chops. Danielson used a knee bar, but Miro powered out and hit a back suplex. Danielson did the pride knees to the head and body on the ground and then curb stomps. Miro went for game over, but Danielson made the ropes. Miro spoke to God and got reversed into the label lock. Miro powerbombed out and used elbows on the ground. Danielson used a triangle with elbows. Miro attacked the eyes to break it up. Miro was bruised on the left side of the head. They traded kicks with Danielson throwing one after the other, but Miro dropped Danielson with one kick. The finish saw Danielson use a DDT and guillotine, with the idea he took advantage of Miro's weak neck. 4 stars half. 5. Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus and Christian Cage beat Young Bucks and Adam Cole in 22-20 of a no DQ Falls Count Anywhere match. Christian's right shoulder was jacked up. Luchasaurus did a moonsault off the apron on both Bucks. Jungle Boy did a leapfrog with a chair and threw the chair into Cole's face. Cole did a Shining Wizard, knocking Jungle Boy off a chair. Cage did a reverse DDT on Cole on a chair. Luchasaurus did a German suplex on both Bucks. Garbage cans got involved. Jungle Boy did a top followed by a second one and then a flip dive into a garbage can shot. Cole was bleeding. Christian told Jungle Boy to do a concerto, but he hesitated and Matt broke it up. Jungle Boy jumped over the top rope and gave Cole a Hurricane Rana off the apron and through a table. Matt came off the top rope to the floor, putting Luchasaurus through a table with an elbow. Brandon Cuter went to spray Christian, who moved, and sprayed Nick. Christian then dove off the balcony with a crossbody on Nick. Cole on the floor gave Jungle Boy a German suplex into the apron. Cole brought in thumbtacks and they put them in Jungle Boy's mouth. The Bucks first kissed Cole and then gave Jungle Boy a double superkick with the thumbtacks in his mouth. They brought in ladders. Cole did a tornado DDT on Nick on the ladder. Luchasaurus threw Cole on the ladder. Luchasaurus did a moonsault on Nick. Jungle Boy had the snare trap on Matt, but Cole saved. Christian went for the kill switch on Matt, but Nick superkicked him. Matt did a flip dive off the stage onto Luchasaurus. Cole used a Panama Sunrise off the lighting stand on Christian. Nick was bleeding. Cole, Matt, and Nick all put on knee pads with thumbtacks. Luchasaurus slammed Cole off the stage onto Cutler and Michael Nakazawa. Luchasaurus came off the stage with a shooting star press onto a bunch of people. Christian went to do a concerto on Matt, but Jungle Boy took the chair and did it himself after looking at the sky at his dad. The idea was to get Jungle Boy over as more than just a pretty boy wrestler by taking out Matt with a chair and pinning him. For the type of match they were doing, this was incredible. 5 stars. 6. Cody Rhodes and Pac beat Andrade El Idolo and Malachi Black in 1650. Rhodes tagged himself in when Pac didn't want him to get booed. Then Pac tagged himself in. Rhodes did a tope on Jose and a quick power slam on Andrade. Rhodes hit the Oscutter on Black, but tried crossroads but Black hit a knee. Black used Black Mass on Rhodes but he tagged Pac. Pac did an Osai moonsault on both. Jose interfered but Arnold Anderson beat him to the back with lefts. Andrade did a tornado dive on Pac. Andrade did a split-legged moonsault on Pac. Rhodes hot tagged and did the Ultimo Guerrero superplex. Rhodes did a wind sprint clothesline on Black. Andrade used the GTR on Rhodes. Pac hit a 450 on Andrade who got his arm on the ropes. Pac did a Fosbury flop but back threw Rhodes into the path and Rhodes got nailed. Black used a running kick that knocked Rhodes into the front row. Pac pinned Andrade after a poison Rana and Black Arrow. After the match, Cash Wheeler attacked Rhodes and Pac. 4¼ stars. 7. Britt Baker retained the women's title over Tay Conti in 15-14. The fans chanted DMD at the start. Baker used a curb stomp and Conti hit a stunner. Baker used an Emerald Flausian on the apron. Some nice moves into a backslide by Baker. Tay used the Tay KO for a near fall. Conti used a Gotch piledriver for a near fall. Rebel distracted the ref and Jamie Hayter threw Conti into the steps. Baker used a curb stomp on the steps and a second one. Conti came back, got on the top rope, did a quick prayer. DND did a moonsault to the floor onto Rebel and Hayter. Conti used the DDT tie and followed with kick after kick. Baker went for the lockjaw but Conti cradled her. Baker reversed into a cradle of her own for the 3 count. 3 stars half. 8. CM Punk pinned Eddie Kingston in 11:08. Just a super brawl. Fans chanted loudly for Punk. Kingston hit him with a spinning back chop before the match started. Kingston's right shoulder was jacked up and at first there was concern he'd need time off after this match but Kingston said he'd be back for his Northeast Wrestling show on November 20th. Then there were Eddie chants. They flipped each other off. Loud dueling chants. There was a spot where Punk was booed. Then there were really loud chants for Punk. Punk juiced and Kingston put his hands on the blood and rubbed the blood of Punk on his face. Punk did ground and pound and the 3 amigos. Kingston did a superplex. Both exchanged strikes. Kingston flipped Punk off again. Punk used the GTS but Kingston fell into the ropes. Punk did all kinds of elbows and another GTS for the pin. 4 stars half. 9. Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara and Jake Hager and Ortiz and Santana beat Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky and Andrei Arlovsky and Junior Dos Santos and Dan Lambert in a street fight in 1936. The crowd was hotter than usual for singing Jericho's song. Guevara looked great. Arlovsky did a Samoan drop. Dos Santos did a vertical suplex and standing moonsault on Jericho, and just looked like he was having the time of his life. Guevara did a Fosbury flop on Page. Santana and Ortiz did topes. Hager did a plancha onto everyone. They used a print sign and a hockey stick. Then a football and a toaster were used. Jericho used a water ski. Guevara did a double springboard cutter on Page and Sky. Santana and Ortiz gave Dos Santos a superplex. Guevara climbed to the top of a very high ladder to do a Jeff Hardy swanton on Sky, putting him through a table in probably the most insane spot of the show. Dos Santos punched Jericho and Lambert went for the pin but Jericho kicked out. Baron von Rasch put Page in the claw. Jericho then hit Lambert over and over with a kendo stick and also hit Dos Santos twice with it. Jericho used a stapler on Lambert, pointed to the sky, started crying, hit the frog splash and got the pin. Jericho looked at the sky and said, "I love you, Eddie." 4 stars. 10. Adam Page pinned Kenny Omega to win the AEW title in 25-10. Don Callis tripped Page for Omega to get the first advantage. Callis choked Page over the rope. Page used a clothesline and pescado. Page did crossbody off the top and Omega kicked out at 1. Callis put the boots to Page and Jim Ross said Callis should be fined and suspended for the red shoes he was wearing. Page was bleeding. Omega hit the Terminator dive. Omega went for "You Can't Escape" but Page got his knees up. Page did an elbow suicida knocking Page into the barricade. Page did a moonsault off the top rope to the floor. Page used a brainbuster. Omega used palm strikes and a springboard sunset flip into a power bomb off the top rope, followed by 2 Snapdragon suplexes and a 3rd Snapdragon suplex on the apron. Omega hit his first V-trigger, went for a one-winged angel but Page turned it into a victory roll. Page gave Omega a German suplex on his head. Not sure landing on your head like that is good for neck problems and vertigo. Omega blocked the Deadeye and hit the J Driller. Omega bit Page in the head and Page came back and bit Omega in the head. Page was on the top rope and hit the moonsault fallaway while standing on the top rope. Page climbed to the top of the post and dove to the floor with a clothesline that put Omega through a table on the edge of the table. Page went for the buckshot lariat but Omega collapsed. Omega hit a V-trigger and a German suplex but Page landed on his feet and hit a power bomb. Page hit the referee with a buckshot lariat when Omega put ref Paul Turner in the way. Omega went for a belt shot but Page ducked and hit the deadeye. Omega kicked out. Page had the belt, but threw it away. They traded elbows and punches. Omega hit 3 V-triggers but Page caught the fourth. Page used slaps. Page hit a rolling elbow, both were exhausted. Omega used counter kicks over and over. Page came back with a big clothesline. Omega used headbutts and a back suplex. Page did a dangerous back superplex and went for the buckshot lariat but Omega countered with a V-trigger. Page came back and hit the one-winged angel but Omega kicked out. The Young Bucks came out. Page was on one side and looked at Nick, who didn't interfere and hit the buckshot lariat to the back of the head. He went to the other side of the ring, looked at Matt, who nodded his head like it's your time. He hit the buckshot lariat and pinned Omega. This was a classic world title change match. It's one of those matches where you notice more and more things on repeat viewing. 5.5 stars. That's it for the review. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. The comments help the algorithm, and I appreciate the support. Until next time.